Ted Phillips. I'm the director of the Housing Coalition, and we've engaged in work around tax foreclosure prevention now for the last 12 years with Michigan Legal Services. I just want to highlight the crisis in tax foreclosure. In the next 12 months, there is the potential for 80,000 homes in Detroit being lost to tax foreclosure. And probably half to a little more than that are pretty assuredly occupied. There's no way we can tell for sure exactly what is or isn't, but those are the raw numbers. When we first got involved in this 12 years ago, Detroit was in a crisis, and the City Council President, Maureen, asked the two of us and a few others to see what we could do about trying to resolve it. That crisis in January of 2003, I believe it was that we had 1,600 homes, 1,600 occupied homes in tax foreclosure. Those were saved that year through a lot of work, hard work by a lot of people. This year, next week, there will be 16,000 homes offered for auction in the city of Detroit from the 21st of October to the 28th. There's also another 20,000 roughly that could be lost by the end of December through a separate foreclosure process through the reversion process that Wayne County Treasurer has implemented. Next year, there are 62,000 parcels representing about 45,000 homes or so that are in jeopardy. That is higher than any place else in the entire country. A few years ago, when there were 40,000 foreclosures filed in Wayne County, that was 10 times the next highest county, which was Cuyahoga in Ohio, according to the Wayne County Treasurer. So this next year, 62,000 just in the city of Detroit, 75,000 in Wayne County. So there's a devastation that is unimaginable that could happen in the next 12 months alone, on top of everything that we've already dealt with over the last several years. A lot of what we've dealt with has been very predictable. Very predictable when you start adding water bills in 2006 and 2007, that 3 years later when you go to foreclosures would escalate by more than double. Water bills are a huge, huge problem with tax foreclosure. On top of the fact that there's 18% interest everybody's paying, like credit card debt, not only on the water bills then, but on the taxes. A few concrete steps that could be taken if you're meeting with the mayor or whoever locally that has the authority and ability to do it. This mayor has already admitted that the assessments are wrong. One of the primary problems for people being in foreclosure is not just poverty, but the assessments are 2 and 3 and 4 times what they should be. We've seen people that have, investors that bought property for $500 to $1,000, sold it for $20,000 to folks, and the poor homeowner that got stuck with that discovers when he does that he's got an $80,000 home. And that's what it's being assessed at by the city of Detroit. And that's not an uncommon situation. So we're over-assessing folks in addition to the poverty issue. There's a state law which says that local communities can have what's called a poverty tax exemption, to which credit Detroit has one of the better ones. You can get 100% exemption. But they don't tell anybody. So a lot of the folks who are very poor are in tax foreclosure for 3 years worth of back taxes, and the first time they find out that they could have gotten all of those taxes waived is when they come in to talk to a counselor in foreclosure.
Which taxes can be waived under that program?
The current year's taxes can be waived under the property tax exemption program.
Property tax?
Yeah. Current property tax.
Property tax under a poverty tax program.
Exemption. A statewide law that provides that every community has to have a program. It does not mandate that it be 100% exemption. Detroit, to its credit on this one, has decided that it will be 100% exemption if you're very low income. So assessment changes, making that an issue locally, pushing for, if you will, a moratorium on foreclosures until those assessments are done, looking at notifying folks of the poverty tax exemption and more fully utilizing that, changing, not putting water bills on taxes. It's not even effective in the city.
That's right.
It's not effective in the city. You put the water bills on, they take it to auction, some investor buys it for $500 to $1,000, and the city loses all the money. It's just crazy in every which way. And several people have noted the land bank. There are a lot of things that can be done there. I'll wrap up real quick. Land bank has 70,000 properties. A lot of those are occupied. There's no reason why they have the absolute authority. They can peddle those for next to nothing, $500 each, what have you. A couple of suggestions at the state level. the Step Forward program in Michigan. Michigan got nearly $500 million to help poor folks and others to save their homes. One of the top reasons why you can't get Step Forward and Michigan help is that you're too poor. That's the reason they give. You're too poor. You don't have the money to pay the taxes on the overassessed home going forward, therefore, you don't get help. So pushing the state more on that, instead of using the money for demolition, using it for paying bills, there's some state legislation to cut back on the 18% interest. Those things will be a major help. And Marilyn's going to talk about mortgage.
Actually, Marilyn and
As quickly as
Vanessa.
possible, so we have an opportunity for other folks to ask questions and our rapporteurs. Quickly, go.
Okay, so this is Vanessa. Fluker who also does the mortgage foreclosure problem is enormous in this region. At one point, one of the reasons we were awarded hardest hit money by the federal government is that we were the top area in the nation for mortgage foreclosures. And that was only a couple of years ago. When you add the tax foreclosures to it, where we are 25 times ahead of anywhere else in the country, we are number one in terms of foreclosures, period. And this is an issue. This is an issue in this area, which Vanessa will talk about, of black landlords. For many low-income families, black families, this is their only wealth. And it is being systematically removed from them. The ACLU filed a lawsuit a couple of years ago. They filed on behalf of our office and on behalf of a number of a class of black family homeowners in Detroit who were losing their homes as a result of what were initially New Century mortgages. Those mortgages were peddled at the instruction of Morgan Stanley and Wall Street. The suit is against Morgan Stanley and Wall Street because they were asked to peddle mortgages in Detroit to target Detroiters that had at least 4 or 5 predatory features that would guarantee that those mortgages would fail and would wind up in foreclosure. We have an enormous problem here with blight as a result of foreclosure. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and again, Vanessa can talk about this, but Fannie Mae, and some of you are here from Chicago, and you had an opportunity to meet with Mel Watt a couple of weeks ago. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are continuing to drive this process and not making homes available as families are forced out of their homes to those families to stay in the homes with principal reductions or buybacks for value. Property values in Detroit have dropped 90% on average as a result of this foreclosure crisis. Thank you.
My name is Vanessa Fluker. I'm a local attorney here in Detroit, and I fight against foreclosures. And the first thing I think is very important is that we need to understand the real life effect of the whole foreclosure crisis and the lack of assistance to borrowers. People many times look at the numbers, but they don't look at the individuals. Contrary to the media hype, you aren't dealing with a bunch of people who quote-unquote bit off more than they could chew. The majority of my practice, the majority of people that are engaged in that fight in the city of Detroit are poor working people, minorities, and disabled people. And that constitutes the majority of my practice. Just by way of putting a picture to this, for instance, my client who's a senior citizen, she's being treated for cancer, she has renal disease, she gets dialysis 3 times a week, she's trying to work out a modification. Nation Star, who's the servicer, sends her a letter. In big bold print it said, "We will not foreclose on your mortgage while you're being reviewed." 2 weeks later, they sold her house at the sheriff's sale. She's steadily sending them documents. We're on appeal on that case right now because the court said, guess what? The banks don't have to stop the foreclosure because there was never any contract. This is happening over and over and over again. My clients who are hard-working people in the city of Detroit, they're in foreclosure because their escrow and taxes went up. Well, the area they were in actually got an enterprise zone tax abatement. Now, I may be a little naive, but the best of my knowledge, definition of abatement means less taxes. Well, guess what? The court said, well, the borrowers didn't tell them about the abatement, make almost 10 payments on a forbearance for them to investigate this. It's over and over and over again. People are sending documentations over and over for modifications. They're systematically being told they're lost, et cetera, and we all know the story behind that. You can all go online, put in Bank of America, false affidavits, all that stuff. You will actually see employees who blew the whistle saying, hey, we were told to shred that stuff when it comes in. This is being, it's just outrageous. And the reason it makes it so outrageous in the city of Detroit is because, as Marilyn indicated, our property values are down approximately 90%. That means that the fear, I can talk about my area. I live in Detroit. Okay. House on my street sells for $5,000. The mortgage on that house is $100,000. The bank gets the $100,000 through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who's insuring the loans. The borrower gets thrown out, and then you have another blighted property on the street. Of course, now you have all kind of quality of life issues. Crime, you know, because of the vacant house. You have the blight, et cetera, et cetera. Blight is not the problem. Foreclosures are the problem. For years with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and no one has stepped up to the plate to verify that they will do something to affirmatively assist these homeowners. I am not going to continue on, but I do have a written statement for the rapporteurs, and I have a disc with the supporting quantitative data to support it.